We're making sure we get hooked up here. We got Adam Horwitz on the phone here. You good, Ryan? Okay, we're good. Let's grab him here. Hi, everybody on Facebook Live here. Alex Horwitz on with us, the autonomy documentary, autonomydoc.com, the director of it. Hi, Alex. How are you? Wonderful, man. Thank you so much. Had a chance to sit down and watch the movie. Now, you're going to be here, the Cinetopia Film Festival in Ann Arbor, Sunday, May 19th, a week from Sunday, at the Michigan Main Auditorium, kind of closing the whole thing out and then heading over to M City. Now, to me, I think it's always interesting, that our perception of vehicles here in the Motor City, obviously, may be a little different from the rest of the country, but if you think about it, I don't know, we're, on some level, embracing autonomy with the technological surge and new companies we're seeing here in Detroit. Alex, there's companies here that I have never seen before in some of the tech corridors. Yeah, and one thing that I really enjoy in the documentary, Alex, is the fact that it's not dated. You're not getting into like legalities and things like that would make it. This is more of a bigger picture, like a macro thing for people. I mean, it's a big picture thing, and for so many people here in Detroit, when we talk about cars and the innovation, I always tell people, I said, you're less in control of a car when you're on the road. You're trusting someone else or something else more than you realize. I mean, just the basic idea of being in a car. You don't know what that person next to you, if they're drunk, if they're sober, if they're distracted, if they've got a death wish. I mean, I'm not being morbid, but we don't. I think. Do you think, as human beings, we think we're more in control of stuff than we actually are?
Think it. A lot of psychologists have done studies to indicate exactly that. We tend to have a very false perception of how secure we are in any given task we're doing. We also tend to have a very false impression of how good we are at physical tasks. Generally, we have a greater estimation of our own ability to, for example, drive than we actually have. That doesn't mean we can't be good drivers. We can be. But for sure, subliminally, we take a lot on faith, even if we don't think about it. As you said, you just sort of presume that the other actors on a road are going to do a certain thing. But as we know, when something unpredictable happens, the consequences can be grim. But I'm glad you pointed out, and thank you for pointing out, that the film is more concerned with those things than things that would make it dated. You live in a town where a lot of people are, I think, relatively well versed in this technology, probably read up on it more than in your average city.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
But there's, that kind of journalism that covers the industry and who's going to be first to market with a level 3 car, that sort of thing, that would date immediately. And my film's not particularly concerned with that. It is much more concerned with the big picture stuff, as you say.
Well, I remember like when the first Google car came out, the Egg, that was built, I may get in trouble for saying this, I don't care. I mean, the first Google car was built over by Roush here in Allen Park, Michigan. Uh-huh. They're the ones that built it. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like Google all of a sudden got in the car business. They did, but they didn't. Right. And Malcolm Gladwell addresses that a couple times during the movie, which, when you see software companies, I think for Detroit, Alex, what we look at is the car is such a unique thing. I remember reading this a couple of years ago. There's more than twice the lines of code in a Chevy Volt than there is in an F-35 fighter.
Yeah.
So that level, how intricate this is, that what people are operating to suddenly relinquish full control, the perception of what they call level 5 autonomy, where you just let it go. It's hard for people to do, and especially here in Detroit, because we are so tuned into this.
Right, absolutely. Well, that letting go of control is, to me, the crux of the movie. It's not, yes, it's a movie about self-driving technology, but more as the point, it's just about control and how we define ourselves through the things we build, what happens as we progress technologically. And, I found, as you saw in the film, I find a lot of analogs to this in our history, like, the elevator, something as simple as an elevator that most people would not think twice about getting into. There were, Park Avenue had to do PR campaigns in the middle of the 20th century for that lasted a few decades, actually, just saying, hey, the automatic elevator, as simple as pushing a button, don't be afraid of it, because people wouldn't get in and trust a contraption that did that without an attendant. So it may be that, fast forward a few decades, we wouldn't think twice about this stuff. But right now we're really in the middle of this crucible where it is beginning to be discussed at the dinner table. And I hope that the film it serves as a tool to help people have more educated and informed.
Oh yeah, it's like Alex, it's really well done, and you're not heavy-handed on either side of it, which I appreciate. I mean, you made me think about it. And the gentleman in Germany, and I apologize, his name eludes me, the guy who really is like the grandfather of autonomous driving. I had never heard of this guy until this documentary, and that alone makes you want to go see this. I was blown away by that. How did you find this guy?
Yeah, well, his name is Ernst Dickmanns, and I will add to his name our Japanese pioneer, right, Sadayuki Tsugawa.
Yeah.
And as I dove into the research, I almost literally as footnotes in other technical journals. There was very little about them. If you look on the web, you can find a couple little videos, sort of antiquated things of Dickmanns, but these guys were doing stuff much earlier than I would have expected it to find this. And indeed, when I was interviewing other people in the industry, big names, like people who had worked on the DARPA Grand Challenges, and I mentioned these names, that people are like, oh, I'd never heard of them, or, oh, yeah, it rings a bell, but I couldn't tell you why. And for my money, these guys are, to use another sin, I mean, these were really the Wright brothers in different hemispheres of this technology. So, it's my good fortune that they're still alive and very much with it. They can be found, like their emeritus professor pages were on the internet, and I just reached out and there they were. So we interviewed Dickmanns in his home, and his first car, which I think he called the Vamors car, was really doing this with just cameras, basically what Teslas do today. In about 1984, I think was his first test. Tsugawa's car predates his even. Tsugawa's car is like 1977 that he's doing it with just one set of stereo video cameras in Japan, 1977. Now his car moved very slowly. It only worked within certain limitations, but I mean, there it is. Those are the guys who invented it. So if my movie accomplishes nothing else, just to be a time capsule for the two of them and show off their work in a way that the world's never seen, I'm very proud of that.
Alex Horwitz with us, the director. If you just join us on Facebook Live as well, Autonomy is the documentary, autonomydoc.com. Coming here for the Cinetopia Film Festival a week from Sunday. It's going to be at the Michigan Main Auditorium, Michigan Theater, michtheater.org for tickets for more information. And, I've actually spent some time with the Super Cruise in the Cadillac, the Level 3 Autonomy, 2 to 3, somewhere in there. And it's interesting with our hours, Alex, that I found myself by the second day, I was letting it drive me to work probably as long as it would go, 20, 25 miles.
Right.
I had no problem with it. I didn't even think about it. I love the fact that I could, you still have to look forward. You're still sitting there where you can take control of it. But mentally, once you release it, I don't think people could comprehend. You're so relaxed. I was in a better place when I got to the radio station in the morning. I was just relaxed. And that's only having it for a week. I can't imagine eliminating the stress of a daily commute where I can let my car do it for me and I'm not going to worry about it.
Right. Well, you're a perfect case study for then why people think this is worth pursuing. So you touched on a bunch of things there that are interesting. I mean, first of all, you're speaking to exactly that kind of sense of trust that is exciting, but also dangerous, right? Because we've seen what happens in cases where people trust something. You were using Super Cruise, but people who trusted autopilot and Tesla a little too much too early. We covered the Josh Brown death, and his death seems to be a case of that, where he was relinquishing too much of his trust and too much control. He wasn't paying attention, like you obviously were. So this is a messy, slippery slope. There's also the notion that the nomenclature and the language is so important, because when you call something, Super Cruise sort of lets you know it's doing something like a cruise control, but I still have to pay attention. Autopilot, even though it's a comparable technology, it basically does, it's a level 3-ish technology. it makes it sound like it's doing it for you, and it really is truly a self-driving car. But the truth is that there's nothing commercially available that fully drives itself. These are driver assistance tools. The idea of something at level 5, as you mentioned earlier, a purely autonomous pod, that's theoretical right now, doesn't exist yet. And on the way to get there, levels 0 through 5, it's very messy gray areas, and that's why I spend very little time on the 5 levels in the film, because I think they're probably going to prove themselves to be obsolete and not very helpful. The way we talk about these cars does need to get codified, I think, in a way that makes us all feel like we understand it better and we know its limitations.
Well, let me ask you a question that I remember Jeremy Clarkson had done on Top Gear a couple of years ago. He was talking about autonomous vehicles and self-driving vehicles, and he thought up that, okay, you're driving down the road, and there's something in front of your vehicle that is unavoidable, and you're at a high rate of speed, and more than likely, if you hit this thing, you're going to die. The only way your vehicle can safely avoid it is to turn to the left, where there's 2 people standing on the side of the road.
Yep.
So it's either you or the 2 people on the side of the road. Now, as human beings, our survival instinct is such that whether we want to admit it or not, we're going to turn left. We're going to avoid the crash. We're going to take out the 2 people. Who or how? It's a great question. Who programs morality into a car? I mean, how do you program that where the car goes, well, there's 1 of you and there's 2 over there, so you're going to bite it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is one of the biggest and for me the most interesting and dangerous and exciting questions of this. We do discuss it in the film. Ultimately, spoiler alert, we don't have those answers of who programs morality. And you're articulating a certain version of an old philosophical problem, usually called the trolley problem, which has existed long before there were self-driving cars. Right. You have the option to pull a lever to intervene that would kill 1 life rather than many. Different permutations of that problem.
Yeah, The Box. Remember the movie The Box, where you press the button? Yeah, you get $1 billion, but somebody dies that you don't know. Yeah, that.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah.
There's different versions of that. I mean, philosophers have not been able to come up with a satisfactory answer to that question before the self-driving car. So why would we be able to have a satisfactory answer now? I don't think we can. I will say this much: proponents of self-driving technology, like the engineers who are building these things, would say, first of all, if we do our jobs right, these cars will see that obstruction before you ever would, because it would have seen it with, LiDAR or radar or its many sets of eyes in a way that you wouldn't. So chances are they will be much more adaptive and reactive and anticipatory than humans are. They're not there yet, but they can be. And secondly, and this is an interesting point that one of the engineers says in the film, humans historically are very bad at things like the trolley problem. Some people have instincts that go one way, some people have instincts that go another. The answer you give to the philosophical problem, oh, well, I would do this instead of that, is not necessarily what your reflexes are going to have you do in the moment of panic. In moments of panic, humans do very unpredictable things. So why is the computerized version of that any less scary or any more scary than the human version? And the answer for many may just be that, but it doesn't have a face. It's not accountable. And that's a question we all have to answer. Like, who is accountable when things do go wrong? Is it the programmer? Is it the company? People have said, well, passengers will no longer be insured as we are today. The companies that make the cars are going to be the ones with insurance now. All things are possible. All things are on the table. My film and I do not purport to have all the answers. But, I think now was certainly the time to make a movie that asks all the questions.
Yeah, and you do a wonderful job with it. Autonomy, again, autonomydoc.com, the website. It'll be here at Cinetopia Film Festival, Sunday, May 19th. Alex Horwitz with us, the director of it. And Malcolm, and I don't want to give it away. I want people to watch this. Malcolm presents a scenario towards the end of it that absolutely rattled me to my bones. Talking about
I think I know the one, yeah.
Oh, my God, dude. That came out of nowhere, too. And all of a sudden I just sat there going, wait, what? But he's got a valid point.
It's actually coupled, I think you're talking about his catastrophic risk. I won't spoil it for people, but just sort of a worst case scenario of how things can go wrong. I think it's coupled right next to our scene that we filmed at M City, which we're going to have our closing night party at after the film festival. I think he's right to ask those things. I mean, look, there's I won't spoil the way he phrases it exactly, but it's some version of the idea that as we save lives on an everyday level, which may be the way this goes. There are projections that say, well, if human error is responsible for whatever it is, 94% of crashes, and that could be eliminated by the perfection of this technology, well, then you do the math. That's how many fewer road accidents there will be. I mean, that's an astronomically large number of lives we'll be saving. But we may open ourselves up to new kinds of vulnerabilities and security risks. that could, in one fell swoop, kill a lot more people than are killed in a car accident at any given moment. It's a possibility. That's all he's raising, and and I think we're right to ask these questions. I think we have to make sure that all of us as citizens can demand of the regulators that they be paying attention to these things, and as consumers, as the people who buy these cars and ride in these cars and use the apps that share these cars, I think we all get to sort of demand standards of the companies that make them and the services that provide them. So that's why I wanted to raise really scary questions like the one Malcolm does.
No,
so it's on our radar.
Yeah, but it's something like you said. The documentary, it makes me actively. All I want is something that it makes me think afterwards. And I don't want there are nuts and bolts documentaries and stuff, but this one about a car, but it's a mindset for our culture, the car culture and the Motor City. I mean, in the country, in the world, how we're doing this. I was thinking real quick, Alex. I know I don't want to keep you too long here, but I was thinking about this. Do you remember there was a period, even before cell phones, and you touched on that in the documentary, how everybody goes crazy and lines up for iPhones, right?
Right.
There was a period probably 20 years ago where we were all obsessed with processors. Who got the latest Intel? Remember, that was the thing. Right. You had to get the new Intel processor. And now you're going with phones where you got to have the latest and greatest cell phone. You got to have the bigger screen, the folding screen, blah, 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 blah. Were cars the first real device like that, where you had to personalize it, where it became that? I mean, we've always had status symbols, especially as Americans, but were cars the first expression of that?
Well, Eddie Alterman, who is chief brand ambassador for Car and Driver magazine and is a big voice in the film, and who will be on stage with me doing a panel after the film next week. That's certainly the way he phrases it. I mean, that's his contention in the film. I think he's probably right, at least in terms of an industry point of view. Like that, we can point to the car industry as the first to really actively exploit it from a PR point of view. Like they built in the idea that, the 57 Chevys are coming, everybody's got to line up. It's certainly I'm certainly not informed enough to point out something earlier. It's entirely possible that, people obsessed over, the latest kind of pocket watch before that. But technological advancement was at a slower pace, before the automobile. It's when around the turn of the century with the assembly line, that's where things start getting perfected, and every year things are getting a little better. And now it's, a gadget is obsolete by the time you take it off the shelf. So, I think the car is certainly a good way of pointing it out. It is sort of the birth of a new era in terms of personal mobility and personal technology, something that you own, something that, lives with you at your house. That you sort of define yourself by, and that changes your life. And it was a huge, it was a huge shift at the time it came out. A story I like to tell before screenings of this film, and apologies to anybody who's going to be there next Sunday. You'll hear me tell it again before the screening. But I think it was 1899, 97 or 99. Somebody got off of a trolley car on Central Park West in Manhattan and was struck by a taxi. It was the first death at the hands of an automobile in the United States, and one of the very first in the world. And one of the national headlines read, "The automobile has tasted blood."
Oh, God.
That was the kind of that was the kind of hysteria in what was supposed to be objective journalism that we were dealing with. Now, that headlines like that and fears like that it spoke to didn't do anything to slow down the advancement of the automobile. The horse and carriage was still destined to become obsolete and something that, was relegated to sports and, personal riding out at the stable. So, if there is a central thesis of the film, it's that change comes and change is coming. And I'm, as a filmmaker, and I'm agnostic about whether this particular change is good or bad. Let's just talk about how it's inevitably going to, and what are the different ways it could play out. So I take for granted that people are going to be just as scared of self-driving cars as they were of the automobile tasting blood in 1899. But I'm sad to say, that it's sort of beside the point, because here it is and it's coming. And we now have to talk about the most responsible ways for it to evolve.
Fantastic stuff, man. Again, everybody, I would highly encourage you, especially here watching in Detroit, if you're on our Facebook Live feed as well. AutonomyDoc.com. I'm looking at the camera right now. MichiganTheater.org for tickets. Cinetopia Film Festival. You guys will be there a week from Sunday. Alex, I appreciate the time. You did what, like I said before, you made us think about autonomous vehicles in a broader sense and how it impacts our culture, and not just here in the Motor City, but worldwide as well, man. Well done job. Really nice job on this.
Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate it.
Okay, man. Alex, thank you. All the best, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. I hope all your listeners come out next Sunday.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care. Bye.
There he goes. Alex Horwitz. I'm seriously not just now. He actually hung up. He's gone. I would encourage you to watch this. It's interesting, again, as Detroiters, how we look at the car is different from anybody else in the world. And self-driving cars or autonomy, it'll make you think. And that Malcolm Gladwell piece will scare the crap out of you. Check it out. Have a great weekend.